Today's video, we're going to be talking about ways to use stencils. I have a whole stash of stencils that I have from all my years of doing paint parties, and it's one of the best ways to add some detailing to your design quickly and efficiently. My members at my paint parties years ago would love choosing one of these to add a design in the background of whatever it was they were painting. Couple of tips. First off, the colors that you choose to use with your stencil are very important. If you're wanting to make a very bold statement, you're going to choose contrasting colors. But you need to keep in mind, is this a pattern in the background, or is this the statement that I'm wanting to make? If it's the pattern in the background, which is probably more likely, you're going to want to choose a couple of colors that are not high in contrast. For today's demonstration, I have chosen Purple Cow and Lavender. They're two shades of purple that are similar, but also just different enough that you'll still be able to see this beautiful pattern emerge once we start painting. So let's get started. Okay, I've just got a little wooden round circle here, and we're gonna start by painting the background of our wooden circle with one of these colors. You need to look at your pattern and decide which part do I want to be what color. So if you want to see on this particular design, each of these areas in between the lines is gonna show up as like the primary color, and then the lines themselves will be sort of like the secondary color. So if that matters to you, if you want it to be like darker purple, then you would probably paint the lighter purple first and do the darker purple on top so that more of it shows up on your stencil. I think I'm actually going to flip this and do the darker purple in the background and do the lighter purple on top. Okay, I've just got a sponge here. This wood is super dry, so I'm actually going to spritz it with a little bit of water so that the paint spreads a little easier on the surface. So if you struggle with painting backgrounds and getting a good solid coat, maybe your paint is too thick, spritzing it with a little bit of water will definitely help getting an even spread of paint. Okay, once your background is nice and dry, you're ready to start stenciling. I only did one coat of purple on this, knowing that I'm going to cover probably 80% of this up with our top color when we stencil. So, don't worry about getting the background color perfectly coated, and just get, a really good coverage or decent coverage on there, and then we're going to lay our stencil down. If you need to, you can tape your stencil down. I'm not going to bother with that. I've stenciled so much in the past that I don't usually have trouble with my stencil shifting. If you have a lot of trouble with your stencil popping up or moving around, you can use a light coat of a spray adhesive. I think there's one that is made by Elmer's that you could use. You spray your stencil with it while it's not on the door hanger, of course, and let it dry. It's going to make your stencil slightly tacky. You'll be able to kind of like glue it down in place or like stick it down, kind of like a sticky note, and then once you're done stenciling, you'll be able to peel it right back up. Okay, I'm going to align this as best I can to kind of get the best spot of the stencil on there, because this stencil doesn't quite cover top to bottom, but it's close enough. And then I'm going to take this lighter purple color and just put a little bit on my palette. I'm using the lid of a paint palette here. One way is using these cheap little triangle makeup sponges from the dollar store. But once you put paint on there, you're going to want to dab off as much of that paint as possible to get it nice and thin on your sponge. And then once you start pouncing, I like to hold my stencil in place if I don't have it glued down, and I just do quick little up and down pouncing motions until an area is covered. Dip back in the paint, again dabbing off as much as I can. The trick with stenciling is to make sure you do not have a lot of paint on your sponge or your brush or whatever it is you're using, because the more paint you have, the larger risk you are of running that paint up underneath the stencil and then having the bleed under in the areas that you do not want it. Also, I'm not like swiping side to side. It's just a quick up and down motion covering small areas at one time. And it's okay if your stencil jumps up and down on there just a little bit, just as long as it's not shifting side to side, because then you'll lose your pattern. Just working in small areas, covering one little section at a time. Now, if you feel like your paint is not going on thick enough and you want like a better coverage, I would suggest doing it in two coats. So, once this dries, go over it again one more time, doing the same method, because this little quick pouncing motion with very little paint on your sponge is not going to give you a thick coat of paint. But again, I think with this design being in the background, that's not all that important to have a super thick coat of paint on something that's considered like a background pattern. Okay, now that I've showed you the sponging method, let's show another way. There's two different kinds of brushes that you can use for this. One is going to have these nice soft bristles, but notice how they're very compact and a little short, and so you can kind of push right there on the tip and it's not going to move a lot. You can put just a little bit of paint on the end there and you can stipple. This brush does the same thing. It's just got more like hog's hair bristles. We'll start with this one. I'm going to dab in just a little bit of this paint. kind of stipple it on there. I don't have very much on my brush, and we're just going to do up and down motion. Now this is giving me a much better coverage than the sponge did. So if you struggle with coverage, you know, and you want it to be a little thicker, using a little brush like this might be better. You can also take a brush like this and kind of just do like a little gentle scrubbing motion, like, and make little circles, and you can quickly paint with that method. The trick again is to make sure you do not have hardly any paint on your brush. I mean, very, very little. It's just on the very end. And so when I swirl in a circular pattern like this, because there's very little on my brush, there's not a chance that it's gonna like get up underneath the edge of that stencil and mess things up. Also, I'm starting in the middle and then swirling out to the edges, as I have even less paint on my brush when I get to the edge. We're gonna do this all the way across this section here, and then we'll move on to the next brush and show you that one. I think by showing it with 3 different application methods, you could kind of see the difference in them. You'll be able to see the difference when we lift the stencil off, and then you can kind of decide which one you like best. And you might even like one method better than another. Like if you're impatient, you're not gonna wanna do the sponge method. It's gonna take too long to make you happy. This little method right here is gonna feel a lot quicker to you because you can do areas much quicker with this little swirling or stippling method. Okay, now that we have our entire project covered, let's do the reveal, my favorite part. You just peel it right up, and there is your beautifully stenciled design. Now, if you have a little area like right up here at the top that needs completing, you can see there's like a harsh line right there where it didn't quite go to the top. Make sure your design is dry, and then you can lay this back down, realign your design, find the pattern, realign it like so. Once you get it realigned, you can finish stenciling the little area that was missed, just like that. Now you have a beautifully patterned background, and even with these 2 purple colors that are very similar, they created a beautiful contrast that creates a lovely pattern in the background. If you're like me and you start to amass a lot of stencils, you might want to invest in a portfolio to store all of your stencils. This has come in very handy over the years to keep my stencils pristine and in good condition, and you can find this in my Amazon shop with my stenciling favorites. And if you don't have any stencils at home, or maybe you're just getting started with this, or maybe you even don't have wood to paint on, we have all these things available in our shop at shopdoorhangers.com. So go check it out now and choose your stencil and wood blank. If you need more stenciling tips or help, drop a comment down below.